Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Always a pleasure to speak in front of you. And tonight I'll be speaking on the Social Security Legislation Amendment, Green Army Program Bill 2014. And I note the contribution from the member for Park, and I share some of the optimism that he has about this program, but I will also detail some of the concerns. I think I was in his electorate over Easter, just on the McIntyre west of Vietnam, and beautiful part of the world. I had a lovely time there, and I have a particular soft spot for the McIntyre, which I assume is his northern border in part of New South Wales. My mum's a Gundawindi girl. In fact, we buried my mum at, we scattered her ashes on the McIntyre 3 years ago. So 3 years ago tomorrow, in fact, that she passed away. So I've always had a soft spot for that part of the world, and it was beautiful. But obviously, when young people especially, go to particularly remote parts of anywhere really, even if they're from Toomelah or from Parkes or any part of his electorate, I do have concerns about who these young people will be supervised by, and sometimes the cultures that can develop in any work camp. My grandfather came from Gundawindi, and he told me many stories about how tough some of the work camps can be in really remote areas. But I'll go to some of these concerns in my speech, because this legislation is of particular concern, because in the electorate of Moreton, 3 Green Army projects were promised prior to the 2013 federal election, and these include, and I'm assuming, rather naively on budget day I guess, but I'm assuming that the Prime Minister will carry out the promise made by the LNP candidate for Moreton, about rolling out these 3 Green Army projects. I mean, interestingly, the LNP candidate promised that there would be a jobs symposium within 100 days of the election. I've written to Minister Abetz, written to Minister Pyne, and there still has been none. That thing hasn't taken place, the jobs forum. But I still live in hope about these 3 Green Army projects that were promised for the Oxley Creek Common, for the Archerfield wetlands and the Granard wetlands, all in the middle of my electorate. These areas, even though I'm an inner city electorate, these areas around, basically I'll call them the Oxley Creek Common area, are a twitcher's paradise. If you go there at any time, you'll find a lot of bird watchers. You can easily find about 70 different species in 1 hour, even though my electorate is only 10-15 minutes from the middle of Brisbane. If you go along there, you can even see the jabberoos. I haven't seen them there, but you can see a jabberoo almost in the middle of Brisbane. Striped honeyeaters, spotted harriers, juvenile little bronze cuckoos, and fairy wrens are just some. But there's been up to 195 bird species seen at this Oxley Creek Common area. So the Green Army seeks to reinstate the failed Green Corps program that was started by the Howard government. The LNP government claims that the Green Corps were undermined by the former Rudd-Gillard government. However, it was a Labor government that first introduced the Land Care and Environment Action Program that aimed to provide work opportunities for young people while achieving positive environmental outcomes. So this grassroots environmental action is extremely important to any community, whether it be the remote community of the member for remote communities mentioned by the member for Parkes, or inner city suburbs that have challenges like in the electorate of Moreton. So I support action to address these local issues. However, I'm concerned that with only a few months until the project is due to start, no one is actually quite clear about the specific details about how the Green Army will work. I had a look at the program, the application program, and there's still a lot of uncertainty about how it will run. And I'm particularly concerned about the exemptions from workplace health and safety, from compensation, and from industrial relations laws, and even from bullying and harassment, because particularly when these people are young, and perhaps they, generally, if you've had any dealings with these in your electorate, you would find that the people have not been the academic successes. They've often had challenges at home, challenges in their family life, and so they're often our most vulnerable. So to take away those protections, particularly health and safety and laws preventing people from being bullied, is going to be a particular challenge. I believe, Labor believes, that we need to do everything we can to get people into work. We are the Labor Party. It's in our title, it's in our DNA. Every individual who can work should be given that chance to work. But we know that that can only happen if there is appropriate support and protection. We don't just work at any cost. That's the strategy of the economic, let her rip society. That's not what Australia has been about since the Harvester decision, and before that, you could even argue. Environmental-based work and trading programs are an effective way, I agree with the member for Parkes, of getting people employment, as well as obviously providing those environmental benefits that help the nation. Workplace training programs have the potential, if they are well designed and implemented, to achieve these twin goals. But there are still these outstanding questions. Firstly, I'm concerned about wages. We acknowledge that the Green Army participants will be paid at the equivalent of a training wage, which, while not overly generous, will be more than the income support payments many of them would likely be on. These payments will also be similar to the training wages received by thousands of other young Australians who are in vocational training or education. Well, certainly before 7:30 tonight that's the case. But unlike trainees or apprentices, participants in the Green Army are under the supervision of the Commonwealth. Denying them the status of Commonwealth employees leaves them in a no-man's land in terms of the employer-employee relationship, which affords a range of workplace rights, an area of law I'm quite familiar with. They are not considered workers, therefore they wouldn't have the same workplace rights. The ACTU President, Jed Carney, said it's about taking away well-paid, well-protected jobs from people and replacing them with low-paid, unsafe jobs. Yet we have every second day we have someone from the government talking about the rollout of insulation and the concerns that came. Youth unemployment is a significant issue within my electorate, and I do not want the coalition government to think seeing unemployment rates for youth are improving as a result of these programs, because the Green Army program wages are not sufficient for our youth to survive. Our youth need real jobs with real wages and real workplace safety measures in place, and with a career path. Those recruited will do manual labour, including clearing local creeks and waterways, fencing and tree planting. I've seen similar programs in my electorate already. Yet this government has ensured that Green Army members will be exempt from Commonwealth workplace laws, including the Workplace Health and Safety Act, the Fair Work Act and Safety Rehabilitation and Compensation Act. One thing that also concerns me about the amendments to this bill is that it doesn't provide adequate protections, namely in the areas of occupational health and safety, workers' comp and rehab. And rehabilitation. Every Australian has the right to work in a safe and comfortable environment without concerns about their physical safety or emotional abuse. This government has a duty of care to these workers, these proposed workers, and if they are not protected under the Fair Work Act, this government needs to expose their plans in more detail so that I can explain to my constituents what the protections will be. On top of this, the 15,000 young people who are intended to be employed under the Coalition's Green Army have no guarantee of protection against racial, religious, sex or other forms of discrimination while working in the program, and will not be protected by workplace bullying laws. And as I said, my electorate, inner city, people can go home at night, but if they're out in Whoop Whoop or beyond the Black Stump working, particularly these young and vulnerable people, they would be particularly open to abuse, I would suggest. The federal government's human rights website states, under the responsibilities of employers, and I quote, "Your employer has a legal responsibility under occupational health and safety and anti-discrimination law to provide a safe workplace. Employers have a duty of care for your health and well-being whilst at work. An employer that allows bullying to occur in the workplace is not meeting this responsibility." End quote. In this case, though, the Green Army will be employed under private service providers. Therefore, they'll fall under state and territory workplace health and safety regulations. Regulations that are under threat in Queensland at the moment. I can't speak for other jurisdictions. We now know that participants will receive at a minimum first aid and some work safety training. but where appropriate, cultural awareness training will also be provided. But the young people in my electorate need a guarantee that they'll be protected against forms of discrimination whilst working in the program. Beyond this, there is no explicit obligation on service providers to provide further training, although we understand the assessment process will ensure that additional training will be rated more highly. We also know that some participants may require work readiness training, including literacy and numeracy if appropriate. This amendment to the Social Security Act, as proposed by the government, neglecting to expose details relating to workers' rights, benefits and protection, cannot be supported blindly. The associated statement of requirements is equally limited on detail. Since this bill was first introduced, further information on how the Green Army will operate has been released, but only piece by piece, and at best it's piecemeal. Access to formally recognised training delivered by a registered training organisation under the Australian Qualifications Framework is noted in the Statement of Requirements as an optional component of the program to be negotiated with each participant. This gives me no confidence that the participants will actually gain access to useful training. The federal LNP government boasts about improving the waterways and environmental hubs, including 3 promised projects within my electorate that I mentioned earlier. However, the LNP government in Queensland is actually selling off community garden spaces that this amendment before the House is actually trying to promote. Nyanda State High School in my electorate was closed down at the end of 2013. Running through the grounds of the Nyanda State High School is the Nyanda Community Garden, which is where the community has come together to work on rehabilitating the Rocky Creek Waterholes Creek. This is a very important site to the local community, and it's good for training and great benefit to the community. It's not far from here that we've actually seen a platypus. I haven't seen it, but I'm reliably informed that because of the work of this community, platypuses have returned there. So the local community requested that any proposed development of the school carve out this area where the Nyanda Community Garden was. Unfortunately, I wrote to the Education Minister, the Queensland Education Minister, John Paul Langbrook, but he refused to shave off this bit of land that would be a great benefit to the community. Even though the LNP government owed this community big time, because when they were last in government in Queensland, they closed down the Acacia Ridge High School and moved the students to the old Salisbury State High School and turned it into a new school called Nyanda State High School. Now they're back in government again, they immediately closed down another high school at a time when we should be investing in education, and also at a time when the suburbs numbers are growing. There's a big boom in young people coming through the local state schools, yet they closed down the high school. So on the one hand, the Abbott government proclaims to be addressing the issue of youth unemployment through the Green Army program, yet on the other hand, they're removing funding for the Youth Connections program, designed to stop young people who have not completed Year 12 from falling between the cracks by working with them and the individual challenges they face to get them on the path to work or education. Last year, almost 75,000 young people were given the help they needed through Youth Connections, and by the end of this year, it hopefully will have reached 100,000. There is overwhelming evidence that supports just how critical the transition from school into work or study, reducing the lifetime risk of unemployment and boosting lifetime earnings. We know how important it is to be either earning or learning. Now Boys Town and the Smith family that serviced youth in my electorate will lose their funding under the LNP government, and these vital services that look after the youth in Moreton will be lost. Labor seeks a guarantee from the government that all participants in this Green Army program who are on income support payments will be better off, regardless of their life situation. We need to ensure that income tax, childcare payments and the potential loss of low-income healthcare cards and the associated concessions won't mean that the participants are worse off. I also have serious reservations about the existing jobs in areas that overlap with activities that will be undertaken by the Green Army. The Green Army simply cannot be an excuse for putting Australians out of work in favour of using low-paid participants. The government needs to stop deceiving the Australian public and under this green cloak of an environmental program. The Coalition's track record on environmental policy, as seen by their disastrous direct action policy, one that they are embarrassed about, and not an environmentalist or economist in the world can find a good thing to say about it. I urge this government to stop ignoring the signs and start looking at effective climate policy and improved environmental preservations.
Thank the member for